For as long as you can remember, the Middle East has been a consistent headline of geopolitical conflict and instability. Modern wars across nations like Iraq, Syria, and Yemen have claimed millions of lives and forced millions more into exile. Intervening superpowers like the United States and Russia have spent trillions of dollars on these battlefields. Why does this specific part of the world seem trapped in a perpetual cycle of violence, regardless of who is in charge or what decade it is? This cycle of violence stems from a century-old flaw physically drawn into the region's borders. Rewind to 1916. For centuries, the Turkish Ottoman Empire maintained stability across a vast, highly diverse population spanning from Hungary all the way to Yemen. They managed this by ruthlessly repressing nationalism. Within the empire, hard national borders simply didn't exist. As the Ottoman Empire collapsed during the First World War, two European diplomats, Britain's Mark Sykes and France's François-Georges Picot, negotiated a secret treaty to divide the conquered lands for their respective governments. This abstract map shows their proposed future for the Middle East. They divided the region using rigid, straight lines that ignored the natural geography of mountains and rivers and paid zero attention to existing societies. Look at what happens when you overlay the actual demographics onto those lines. Entirely distinct religious and ethnic groups, Sunni, Shia, and Kurdish populations, were suddenly forced into a single national identity. At the same time, historically unified communities were split apart into separate, newly invented countries. The architects of the Sykes-Picot Agreement built a permanent state of internal friction into the map. They guaranteed endless civil and territorial disputes long before the ink was even dry. A few decades later, this already fractured surface map was subjected to an immense stress test. Beneath the deserts, prospectors found the largest reserves of oil and natural gas in the world. This map visualizes the region's subsurface reality. Roughly half of all the world's proven oil reserves and 40% of its natural gas are clustered right around the Persian Gulf basin. The geographic irony is how these massive energy deposits intersect with the artificial map above them. They failed to align with political borders or majority populations. In Saudi Arabia, for instance, nearly all the kingdom's oil wealth sits directly underneath the Eastern Territories, home to its marginalized Shia minority. This geographic lottery gave historically isolated, barren peninsulas a massive share of the global economy. Qatar, a desert with no rivers or rainfall, found itself atop the world's largest offshore natural gas field, which it shares with Iran. Arbitrary borders now dictated who controlled the lifeblood of the global economy. What were once local ethnic frictions immediately escalated into high-stakes, trillion-dollar resource wars. Extracting half the world's oil is only the first step. That wealth is strategically useless if you cannot physically transport it out of the region and into global markets. Because of the region's geography, the vast majority of this energy is forced to travel through narrow maritime arteries. Millions of barrels of oil a day must squeeze through the Strait of Hormuz and the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, channels barely 30 miles wide at their narrowest points. When a maritime choke point like this is blocked, the result is a shipping crisis that stalls billions of dollars of trade in a matter of days. To prevent that, superpowers like the United States, China, and European nations have built dense, overlapping military footprints right alongside these choke points. They are there to protect their energy lifelines from local proxy wars. The strategic weight of these waters ensures that the Middle East is never left to its own devices. As long as global stability depends on this energy, foreign superpowers will continue to militarize the region to protect their own interests. Artificial political borders, misaligned demographic realities, trapped subsurface energy resources. The only mechanism keeping these divided states and absolute monarchies from collapsing is the wealth generated by the fossil fuel industry. The modern Middle East is a century-old geographic mistake, temporarily held together by a thick layer of petrodollars and foreign military backing. But that temporary fix has a rapidly approaching expiration date. The global economy is actively transitioning away from oil and natural gas. A permanent drop in global oil demand will evaporate the region's primary source of leverage. It will cut the very funds these governments use to subsidize and pacify their restless domestic populations. Without the endless flow of oil wealth to smooth things over, these artificial nations will be left to face the raw, unresolved demographic tensions created by European diplomats back in 1916. The conflicts of the Middle East are not winding down. As the oil dries up, the consequences of a map drawn a century ago will violently reset the geopolitical chessboard for the next 100 years.